people are just going to go so far into technology. The commodity that's going to be sought after is someone with a personality that has an ability to be articulate and to connect and to
Totally.
tell a story verbally or maybe in public. That's the commodity I want to teach my kids. I want them to look somebody in the eye and say, "Hi, Arthur, nice to see you.
Right.
Where did you vacation last?" Creating this ability for connection, because that's what ChatGPT won't be able to replicate.
Hello, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us in another episode of Arthur's Roundtable. Super excited. I've been trying to get Kristen to do this for a few weeks, and it's my fault because we keep on screwing up the schedule. So I'm super happy to have her here. And we have a long history together. I don't know, maybe 13, 14, 15 years, something like that. In fact,
Yep.
we were colleagues in that at the beginning of Family Office Insights, Kristen helped me with narrative and writing, which is what she does, right? And for among other things. So she was the original editor to the Peer Insights reports and then some. So we have a long and delightful history. So Kristen, thanks for doing this today.
Arthur, it's always a pleasure to see you and be in conversation with you, and I'm just overjoyed to be here.
So let's do this. Thank you again. Let's start from the beginning. Talk about your journey because you've had lots of lives. But one of the things I don't
Isn't that
mind
the truth?
sharing with everybody is that you've been consistently interested in food and travel, right?
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do I begin? I still in my mind think I'm very young, but 20 years in the wealth management family office space at this point. So the story began, I was a journalist. I studied journalism and theater in college. I wanted to go be on TV and be a broadcast journalist. And I quickly pivoted to written journalism, and I found my way into writing for Institutional Investor, covering what was called wealth management. And I couldn't at the time define what wealth management was. Wasn't sure what the difference between a wealth manager or a private bank or an RIA. And then this term family office came up, which blew my mind. So I spent years doing what a lot of journalists are trained to do and develop sources. And that was a whole load of fun because you get to actually meet with people over coffee or drinks or
Especially
meals.
in New York City where it's, conducive to that sort of activity, right?
I was out all week. I mean, I was never at my desk. And I remember one editor saying, "You're a bad journalist if you're sitting at your desk." And I took that to heart. So I spent years learning about that beat, understanding what wealth was. But you alluded to it before. At the same time, my heart was in this food, travel, lifestyle space. So I consistently freelanced for that. I would write articles, I'd go on press trips, I would cover that world at night, on the weekends, sort of thing. So I kind of have these two parallel paths always happening, covering the wealth landscape and covering food, wine, travel, lifestyle. And eventually, and we'll get to it, but today that those two worlds have crossed. And I think as every journalist comes to some point in their career, they try to figure out, how do I make more money? What's the next step? Am I going to just write about this thing for the rest of my life? And we worked together at this point in our career too. I worked for Institutional Investor the second time around, where I created a family office networking group and then eventually transitioned to the conference side of the business, where I was overseeing their family office practice, both in the US and Europe. And that sort of defined, I think, my career and where I am today, because I did the content component, the writing, the curating, the panels, finding speakers and all that. But I started developing this Rolodex, meeting families all over the world. And my ask wasn't a big one, right? Let's go grab a drink. Tell me your pain points. What are your challenges? Okay, would you like to come to this lovely event in Lake Como? So I put a
I was
lot of
at that
time
event,
into
remember? Yeah.
building. I
Yeah.
know, which was great. I do remember us singing Frank Sinatra at the piano bar.
That was fun.
But, and it was great. It was such a good time in my life where I was able to just meet people without any real agenda and get to truly understand the family office space, which was really neat. I, met some great friends, traveled all over the world. And as you and I both know, eventually I met my husband there too. So just really very formative. And then COVID happened. I had 2 children. And my last job before becoming an entrepreneur, I was with Crain, and I helped them launch their family office publication and their events business. And I had that aha moment that I think most entrepreneurs had. I sort of went back into the editorial seat, and then I realized but I also have this commercial mindset, right? Like I see these concentric circles, I can put them together. The Rolodex is worth something. It feels like this is the right time to strike out on my own and to do the thing for myself. So that led me to earlier this year. I
Yeah, it was just
left the
just
corporate world
recently. Yeah.
behind. Yeah, this calendar year, January officially, and I created my business called Wealth Reimagined, and it was my way of bringing in the family office space, the lifestyle component, all the things I'm good at, and putting it under one umbrella. So that was a really big moment for me.
Yeah, so I call that the Goldman Sachs trade. What I mean by that is that I tell my kids, I said, look, sooner or later, if you want, go out on your own and wake up every morning toiling away for yourself. But you can go to Goldman Sachs, build a Rolodex on their brand that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do just because of their brand. I mean, it's just a reality. Spend 10 years there, walk away with 10 million bucks. Meanwhile, they made 300 million, but now you have a Rolodex that you wouldn't otherwise been able to glean on your own. And shame on you if you don't do something on that. And that's exactly what you've done, right? Yeah.
A lot of people gave me that. I think you were probably the first one to give me that advice, and several others in my career, people that I consider friends and mentors, said, build the Rolodex on someone else's time if you can.
Yeah, yeah,
And believe me, I did great work for all of those folks, and we
for
all put in
sure.
long hours, but being able to travel and have the expense account and take the time really is, I don't know, if anyone asked me for my advice today, I would pass that along, because absolutely.
An institutional investor was a good gig for you, right?
Yeah, I worked there twice in my career. I mean, I met my husband, some of my best friends. I don't know. I need to send them a thank you card probably.
Yeah. So tell us how it's going so far and what exactly would you like to see it evolve to?
Yeah. So the easiest way of describing what Wealth Reimagined is, it's an editorial platform and an advisory services business, if that makes sense. So what I'm doing is doing all of the storytelling that I'm well known for, right? So we have a Wealth Reimagined edit. So that's my digital issue every month. And that showcases Q&As, interviews, podcast recordings, articles on travel and lifestyle. So all the things when you think of my name, we associate with the content that's there. The thing that I'm really leaning into, which feels really good to do since I'm now independent, is a lot more video content, podcasting. I launched my own YouTube
You
page to really dig
don't have
into
to ask
travel.
permission from anybody
I don't have
to
to
say,
ask permission. Right. And it's me. And I think, when you're a traditional journalist, and I also had a boss once tell me I wasn't kind of a journalist, and I took that as a good thing. I always felt like I wanted to be part of the connectivity of the story too, right? Like I had something to add as well. But when you're reporting, you're the outsider, you're stepping back, it's the person you're talking to. And while I'd never overstep that boundary, I think now being in the position where I'm in to share my insights, and also I have this interesting viewpoint, right? From hearing all of these people's stories from over the years, that sometimes when I'm interviewing somebody, I could say, I just spoke to X, Y, and Z person the other day, and then this was their take, and they love hearing that. So I just feel like I could add to the conversation more so than I could before. So yes, an editorial digital magazine, YouTube content, lots more on social media. So it feels very good to be there. And then I have an advisory services business. So I take on clients, and a really good way of explaining this is sort of white labeling the things I've done in the past for other places I worked for, right? Strategy on how to approach the family office space, how to approach that client, the ultra high net worth client, writing, podcasting, dreaming up those editorial plans for what the next article should look like, that sort of thing. And then my other expertise is in curating these conferences and experiences. I think most people still really love this in-person connectivity, which will never go away. But this next gen of folks are kind of done with the traditional conference, right? How do we dream it better? How do we make it better? How do you and I get a chance to go somewhere, learn something, meet new people, and also have fun? So I think that's been my calling card for a while. So I do help clients do that. So it could be a family office retreat, it could be a conference, it could be a series of smaller events. But obviously, I'm targeting folks that their end client is the ultra high net worth. And I'm able to provide those insights into this is how you should really develop relationships in this space. This is how you should approach them. These are some of the industry events you can look at that are really high caliber. So that's been fun. And then the third thing that Wealth Reimagined does is travel. I'm affiliated with Fora Travel. I'm a certified travel advisor. But this is really just an amalgamation of all the things that I've done in my career. So if someone hires me to do, say, a family office retreat, I can do everything from soup to nuts, right? I could do the travel. I could do the curation of the event. I could find the speakers. I could help bring the right humans into the seats. I'm just trying to work smarter and bring the things together. And you and I both know, because we could talk about it for forever, I've traveled all over the world. I've curated conferences all over the world. I was crazy enough to plan my own wedding in Italy, so definitely have the experience there.
You had your wedding in 2 places, which was wild, right?
I officially had 3 weddings. I
Yeah.
got married at City Hall in New York City, and we had a real 3-day wedding in Tuscany, and then we had a party back in my hometown of Staten Island
Yeah,
after it was all said and done.
I
So
remember
it
all
was
that.
great. Same person 3 times.
I can't say the same thing. So, can we, without disparaging anybody, and I'm purposely saying it that way, or being harsh about the family office conference business, what do you see happening there? I mean, there's been a fair amount of negative press about the way conferences are run for family offices, and there's lots of, we know them all. Many of them are great people. What do you see trending there, and how do you see it being, without giving away the stuff that you would otherwise charge for? I'm not asking for free advice,
Sure.
but talk to us a little bit about what you see going on there.
So I alluded to this before. I think there's a big shift in the traditional conference model being dead, where people are tired of being talked at. Sitting at a panel, droning on for 45 minutes to an hour, slow moderation. We've all been there, and we don't go for that, right? We're going for the connectivity and the drinks and meeting new people. And I think some places, media organizations, conference companies just can't figure out how to innovate there. And I saw that. It's part of the reason why I launched my own business. I thought all they keep trying to do is the same old thing. And marketing budgets for people that sponsor and underwrite these events are getting smaller and smaller. Even at the bigger, larger banks and investment firms that used to write the big checks, that's changing, right? So now people have marketing dollars and they need to put it towards something. But they're really thinking about it much more closely than they did in these early 2000s where marketing budgets were really fat, right? So that's the biggest thing I've seen. And then I just saw a lot of these firms not innovating, just doing the same thing over and over. And then the ironic thing that I saw, everyone kept talking about succession planning in the family office space and wealth management. And then you'd look around at conferences and it really skewed towards the older generation. And I said, well, if you don't have people under 50 in this audience, what's the future of your business? So that was another thing I noticed that I just thought, oh my goodness, we need to be, one, reaching out to younger people, but you also have to be providing them an experience or an environment that they want to come to. This was a criticism I used to get when I worked for firms. They would tell me I didn't have enough young people on panels, or I didn't have enough women represented. And how dare I, because I'm a woman who loves covering topics like women and wealth. And my response to that always was, but I'm asking younger people, diverse humans, like we're trying to make this, a much more bigger picture, but they don't feel comfortable coming to these events for one reason or the other. Either it's not attractive to them, either if it's too long out of the office, what have you. So I think the whole world is shifting towards, it's an overused term, but like more experiences. Like, am I going to something to sit in a room for 2 days and have people talk at me in a really dimly lit room with rubber chicken? Or can I go to something where there's this connectivity? I'm learning. Maybe there's 2 or 3 really great speakers, or there's a workshop that I get to, do something physically and talk to the person next to me and engage in. I think that's the future of it. I mean, organizations like Future Proof have done a really nice job of sort of reimagining the large scale conference or what have you. I've spoken at that event twice. And the first time I was there, I had to reprogram my brain on how to be at an event. They're like, "There's no suits, there's no whatever." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, I don't even know how to do that." And by year 2, I was loving every minute of it. So there are some companies that are seeing that trend. They're responding to it. They're trying to make it more fun,
Is Future Proof the
So
one
I
from
think
the guy from CNBC?
yes, it's run by Josh Brown and Ritholtz Wealth Management, and they tape podcasts in the middle of it. They do cooking classes. You could take 3 or 4 different types of exercise classes in the morning. And I will say, a couple of women in the industry have said this to me, and I get it. Women have it the worst at industry conferences because you're wearing stupid high heels all day long. You're cold. You don't get a chance to work out. You have to look a certain way. Like it's always very high pressure, exhausting, what
Demand.
have you. And then you could go to something like that where you feel a little bit more like a whole person. So I think that the industry is trending that way. And then for me, and maybe this is just my personality, but I've always done better in smaller groups. I'm not an introvert in any sense, but I think if it's 20 people versus 200 people, I'm going to get a lot more out of it. And when I think of curating events, or if I think of the ones I've gone to that I've really enjoyed, it's the smaller scale stuff. It's more intimate. I think you can learn more. I think you could genuinely come away with a new friend. And I think that's where the next rising gen, whatever we want to call it, younger people coming into the industry are looking for, because they don't want to take 3 days out of the office to go to a convention center in Orlando, right?
Yeah,
It's just
that's
not the way
rough.
anymore.
It's really not a lot of fun. And many of these uh, have also been boondoggles for people to find jobs, right? Where you go every year. How's your career going? Oh, there's somebody over here looking for something, which is omnipresent in almost every industry conference. It's not relegated to family office type stuff. So there's some of that, I think. What do you think the challenge, at least from my perspective, is many of the people that I know that the sponsors would like in the room aren't going to come because they're doing their own experience with their own money in their own way, their own family, and they don't need to have somebody else arrange that for them. And then they are the 3 of 50 people in the room that have the yellow tags and they get accosted. So it ends up being an unpleasant experience. How do you fix that? Can you?
I don't know if you can. I think that's the problem with the traditional sponsor model. And you just hit it on the head. Like family offices don't need to come to anything. And I think the ones that are really well resourced, well structured, maybe multi-generational family offices that are set absolutely will never attend one of those events because there's really no need. The ones that I think do, I've seen a rise in like the startup family office. So maybe someone just got plucked from another industry or another job to now take over a family office. Those folks need the networking, right? Because they need to understand operations, activity,
Right.
how do you kind of manage the family, and they'll get that through the peer networking. But the fact of the matter is it's always a nice to have, right? So you have to be offering something that uh, is a little unique, and maybe it's a little bit more flexible and not as rigid as some of those other groups used to be. I think the hardest thing for me when I was curating them was always almost policing who was a proper family office and who wasn't, right? That was almost the bane of my existence for a decade plus. Who they say they are, do they match this
Yeah,
criteria?
totally.
I mean, I would argue now the family office of today even looks a lot different than 15 years
For
ago.
sure.
And there is a lot of money. People like, so I think I'm a family office. How do I get it started? I had a great conversation with a friend just last week who, business owner, what have you, just decided he's going to launch his own family office. Definitely has the capital and the presence and the structure to do it. And he was telling me all about how he's really integrated AI into putting this all together. He's got a tiny little team and he's really kind of built out this virtual family office, which I think is becoming more of the norm than it was in years gone by. So I'm also seeing that, how many resources do they need? But I guess on the flip side of that would be if you're building this virtual thing and it's up and running and it's really efficient, which is all great, and maybe it's cheaper to run it than it did 20 years ago, they may want the connectivity. They may want to sit in a room with peers over dinner to be able just the camaraderie, I think. So there's a space for it. But I think anybody who's curating these events or like looking to build out these groups really have to understand the nuances and how it's changing, how technology has changed it, how COVID's changed it, and just really ultimately knowing it's a nice to have for family offices.
Yeah, I've just struggled in justifying ever doing, although I think you know that we did one conference for Family Office Insights at the UN right before COVID. And I know that there was one other time that we did a conference, and they were both largely successful if you measured them in terms of the legit family offices that showed up, and that we didn't expect to monetize it in any way. Just, we weren't standing there at the door and saying, make sure we got paid. And that was part of the success, is that, you know, we financed the thing ourselves, more or less, right?
I think that makes a big difference. Is it a commercial mindset? Are you doing it for whatever reason you're doing it for, which makes a difference?
Yeah. And I've asked you the question, but I'm going to partially answer it myself. What we've done is just quietly do small events, private, with a handful of people that I know, and just sit around and shoot the shit without any sponsor. And I will admit that I'm grateful that I'm in a position to do that, because I don't have to squeeze every penny out of Family Office Insights, so I'm in a position where I can do that, where I don't have to worry. I don't have to make sure that I'm making money everything that we do, because there's other stuff going on. Do you think that and I don't need to belabor this, but one of the things that I struggled with was that the people who were doing the family office conferences, that was the way that they made their living. And so they had to make sure they made enough money out of it to sustain the business, their lifestyle, or whatever it is. And fortunately, I've been in a position where I haven't had to do that, right? There's lots of other ways we're making money. Do you think that the traditional method of sponsor dollars catalyzing the ability to do a conference to get people in the room is dead, or is it still have legs?
Good question. I think there is a way you could do it more seamlessly that might feel more authentic today than it did before. But I think where it's a pay for play model, I think that's dead, in my opinion, just because it's just too hard. You can't, once you do pay for play, where it's so many different sponsors just paying to be in the room, you've already bastardized your Rolodex. I hope a family's not being sold to every 5 seconds. Is there a model where you have a sponsor, a couple, maybe sponsors in kind, where they're just there providing something, or they're just there in the room and they're not speaking? I think there's ways of going about that feels more authentic, because I think at the end of the day, people know, someone has to underwrite an event. And I think that's important. So I would say always the less sponsors, the better. And I think if you can make money elsewhere and then have the event really truthfully be focused on content and connectivity, if you could do that, then you've definitely won it. So I think there are smaller organizations doing really great things in that place. I think the traditional media method that's just also has a family office event is more likely to fall into that pay for play model, just because that's what their overall model is. And that does work in other parts of finance. It works in other industries, right? But I think with the family offices, it just often doesn't.
Yeah, just because this is recorded and I don't want anybody to get upset. Actually, I don't give a shit. Just the there are conferences that have become huge, which people are happy to go to and pay, because
Hmm.
they get to run around in the hallways. And so that's, like you said, in other parts of finance, it seems to work,
Yeah,
the pay to play model, right?
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, real estate's a great example of that. Like, there's a lot of great real estate conferences where that's the model and it just works,
Yeah.
you
It
know?
just, yeah.
I think the family office space is just so nuanced. You also mentioned this too. I mean, I think there's different models now, right? There's membership models where people pay a fee and then they're attending events. So each event isn't underwritten, or they don't have a sponsor per event. That usually lightens the load. Other things, if there's a nominal ticket fee to get in where the person has to buy into actually wanting to be there,
Yeah.
That's interesting too. So I think there are ways of doing it. But I think if you focus on smaller scale and quality, that's the best way forward.
Yeah, I don't mind saying I went for the first time, even though I'd known about it and been invited prior to a conference that's held in uh, Cayman in January, I think it is. I went for the first time last year, and it was really good. Like, and I wrote a check, and I paid my own way, and I was happy to do it.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't
Mhm.
feel like yeah, that feels better to me. And a lot of people are not in a position to or aren't willing to do that. But I paid for my hotel room, I paid for my flights, I paid for the ticket price, and it was worth it, right?
Yeah.
So that
And there's this inherent buy-in, right? Like you want to be there,
yeah,
you pay for it. So I think that's something that's interesting. Now, if you price that ticket too high, you may lose people and you might lose people regardless depending on people's budgets, but I do think that that buy-in is important. And even just in if we're not even talking about the family office space, like just how we buy things and how we attend things now, right? I think it's this 2025 mindset of, you know, you're buying into it. Like if it's free or if it's coming to you, you're probably more likely to push it aside and not care so much about it.
yeah, yeah. Presumably, if you pay for it, it has some value, right? So tell us a little bit more of how the audience who might be listening to this can help you in your business and your new
Sure.
venture.
Well, I am always looking to share interesting stories. So the thing that between me launching my business and well, between me leaving the corporate world and launching my business, I kind of took a mini sabbatical, which felt really good. And it wasn't really sabbatical because I have two young children, but
Right.
I wasn't working for 3 months. And I kind of did this whole, you would have appreciated this, Arthur, like a soul searching moment of a lot less screen time, a lot less busyness. And I'd had this business plan I had been sitting on and I was like, well, this is what I think I have to do, right? Like, let me try to figure out in the quiet moments, reading a book, being bored, what is it that will come to me? And not to sound too spiritual or religious, but I was like, what am I missing that the universe can kind of tell me about? And I learned a lot during that, I guess, this pause of mine, just having conversations with friends with no agenda, and I was trying to figure out what really mattered to me, right? Like and believe me, making money matters to me. I'm definitely a capitalist who believes in uh, you know, making money. But at the same time, I was like, but who am I at my core? And it really just kept coming up over and over. I'm a storyteller. I like telling people stories. I like conversations like this where it feels like we're really together and we're connecting. And I wanted to focus on telling stories that mattered to me because I cover the whole spectrum of wealth, right? Everything from investing to trust and estates to, you name it, like everything that I've covered. And the things that kept coming back to me were stories about legacy, about lifestyle, about the family, and this like family connectivity, the dynamics. And the other thing that was really resonated with me was this connectivity about women and wealth, right? We keep hearing about this great wealth transfer coming up and all this money coming into the hands of women. But even me in my 40s, I look around and talk to my girlfriends. Many of them are really underprepared, have no clue about the finances, maybe, the breadwinner themselves or just as much as their partner, and they're still not educated. So I just felt like, okay, I want to tell stories that are going to matter and that are going to move the needle forward and help people be proactive in their lives. So women in wealth is a huge component of the content I cover. Philanthropy and giving back is something, but also just highlighting stories about entrepreneurs, people doing really interesting things that may be impacting our world in the future. So I think that was really powerful. So, people that are listening that may have a story to share, may want to talk about it. I love to sort of share those stories that aren't in the mainstream media, that aren't getting the credit, or maybe they're not the senior professional in their establishment. So, how do we help this rising gen share their stories too? I think technology and social media has made there's so much information out there, but some people just aren't equipped in like getting their narrative right? Like how do I position myself? How do I market myself? How do I be part of the story? How do I get on the next panel? How do I get invited to that next conference? So I think people that are interested in sharing those sorts of stories with me, I would love to hear them. Anyone that's looking, and particularly anything that's connected sort of this lifestyle legacy component, because sort of my new thing is legacy and lifestyle is the new wealth. and I want to start telling those stories.
It's a little overused, but experiences are the new sort of aspirational wealth.
So someone said to me today, you're going to love this. I was talking with a family office friend in London who always gives me the best books to read. He gave me 100-Year Life once, which I loved, about longevity and how we need to look at like our stages of our life, not 3 life cycles, but maybe we never retire sort of thing. And he gave me a book today. Ooh, I'll pull it up right now. And it had this concept called, it's called Die with Zero. And there's
Die
a
with zero.
concept
I
of
love it.
ROE,
Yeah. Die with
return
zero.
on experience, Arthur. How cool is that? ROE, return on experience.
Yeah.
And he was explaining to me, I cannot articulate it well because I've not read the book, although it's sitting in my Amazon cart now. But this concept of, we're dying, can't take it with us, right? So how do we there's a lot of people that have all of this wealth and maybe aren't even using it for any reason, right? They're just kind of hoarding it. So how do yes, it would be great if you want to do good with it. Wonderful. But even how are you just enjoying it? Like with your friends or family in a way that's connected, So I love that concept of return on experience. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to
I like that
read this.
too.
But
So I've spent a fair amount of time with a handful of people who have endless amounts of money. And I learned this through a friend in detail because he's kind of the expert at it, is instead of doing the traditional, I've got to make sure I pass all this money on and make sure my heirs have, why don't you figure out what your best life is and live it now, right? Because the money is meaningless, right? It's just there. And so I think that part of the paradigm shift was everybody's telling me I have to secure my stay rich money, which is fine. But meanwhile, I'm agonizing over spending, 50 grand on a vacation for my family. And I should be doing that willingly and maybe 100, right? Because it doesn't even make a dent, right? But meanwhile, I get to spend time with my family. I don't know if you saw have you watched Landman with Billy Bob Thornton?
no, put on the list. Landman. Got it.
No, this is epic. He's making the
Okay.
rounds now because he has the next episode. But Taylor Sheridan, who did film that was largely filmed in Park City, Utah. What was the name of it? I'll think of it in a second. Anyway, so there's a scene in Landman where the guy that owns the Dallas Cowboys comes in to this is not a spoiler, to basically Landman's an oil guy, and the guy that owns the oil company is on his deathbed. He's young, but he's so stressed out. And the guy that owns the Dallas Cowboys comes in and makes this big speech that everybody loved about how the best thing he ever did was being business with his family. So his family and his kids could be part of his business. And that far exceeded the exponential wealth that he's created. But it's stories like that are moving, and it's been talked about in the media quite often, despite how bad the media is in general. And then there's another scene in Landman. It's a must watch, by the way, Kristen, where
Hmm.
it talks about climate change and why we all are dependent on oil, because it's all about the oil, the business of oil, and how
Yeah.
hard it is and dangerous it is. But it also, Billy Bob Thornton makes this big speech to somebody who doesn't really understand how much oil we actually use and that we have to continue to produce it until we find appropriate replacements. And it's like
Yeah.
epic dialogue, a storytelling thing that you would love just because that's exactly what it is. It says, wait a minute, you're looking at it from a perspective that we don't need oil. Well, we need it until we find something else, right? And it is
Right.
just well
Oh,
written.
that's fascinating.
Yeah, great stuff.
I love finding books or TV that sort of relate to our space because I actually put that in one of my digital issues. I always say what I'm reading or I'm watching or what have you. And I love to hear that. Okay. Landman. I've got it. And you have to
Absolutely.
read Die with Zero
That's a
and
good one.
we'll reconnect.
Yeah. So the storytelling is, I mean, back to the original Romans and Greeks and Shakespeare. I mean, it's always been about storytelling.
You bet.
And Andreessen Horowitz just came out today, and it's like this is not like an epiphany, but they're saying storytelling will be the gold of this generation because everything else can be done by Chat GPT except for the human element in the end product,
Mhm.
right? And so it can make up great stories. Mary and I were just laughing this morning because the New Yorker comes out with those cartoons and then it asks the audience to write the caption, and then you win if you write the caption that they select. Well, you
Cool.
can feed that cartoon into ChatGPT and have it write the caption for you, but it's no
Sure.
original thought. Like, what fun is that, right? So, I think
It's so funny you said this because I had this argument with my dad recently because he's hopped up on understanding AI and that every business will be. Listen, I have talked and written too much about how AI is being, it's in everything, and we have to embrace it. Like there's no way that we're not embracing it. And but my father was saying, looking at his two young grandkids, my kids, saying, well, they're gonna have to like learn AI, and I said they'll have to learn to use it. I said, but the things I'm gonna teach my kids. It's how to talk to somebody. It's how to create a relationship. It's how to network. What's going to happen is people are just going to go so far into technology. The commodity that's going to be sought after is someone with a personality that has an ability to be articulate and to connect and to
totally.
tell a story verbally or maybe in public. Every company is going to eventually need a CEO that can speak on CNBC and get out there. And salespeople will still need to exist because there needs to be this connectivity. And I said, that's the commodity I want to teach my kids. I want them to like look somebody in the eye and say, hi, Arthur, nice to see you. Where did you vacation last? Right? Like creating this ability for connection because that's what ChatGPT won't be able to replicate. And yes, I'm not saying let's not understand it and utilize it in a way that makes sense to streamline our businesses. I mean, AI has helped a lot actually in the launch of my own business and being able to make decisions faster and streamline efficiencies for sure. But yeah, I think we all
Yeah,
need to
no,
still be able to tell stories.
tell stories, engage with people, look somebody in the eye, have a handshake, be genuinely interested in what somebody's saying and actually listening, right? Because most people don't.
No, I could see it. Every Zoom
It's
I'm on, no one's
interesting to
listening. And I
see
was like, oh, if we
when
just made
you
a phone call,
interact with
maybe
a
someone
group of
would be forced
people
to
and you
listen.
overhear a conversation, you be forced to listen, right? How many times have you been in a conversation and the person that you're talking to is just waiting for you to shut up because they have the next thing on their mind that they want to say? They're not even listening to you, right? And I'm being critical of that because, most people are bad listeners. And I think that with the uh, immediate gratification nation that we've created through screen times and all these social networks. I'm not saying anything that's, hasn't been said before, but, the sound bites and people getting, you said when you were bored, I don't think I've been bored in 50 years. And I'm not being critical of you, but like,
I'm only doing it on airplanes and when I'm on a bus.
yeah,
I try to put my phone down. I
yeah,
don't connect to the internet and I try to just stare out the window. I really do because I think, and believe me, I'm not doing anything perfectly in terms of shutting down screen time, but that's been my new, if I'm on a bus going to New York City, if I'm on an airplane going somewhere, maybe I'll watch a movie if it's a long flight. But after that, it's reading or staring out the window.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, when I would regularly just stare out the window in New York City because it's so much fun, taking an Uber from one place to another. It's always interesting to see what's going on there. But yeah, I think that the storytelling and then the editing skill is going to be super valuable because you can have the AI do all the grunt work. Then you have to look at it and say, does this make sense? Right?
Absolutely. I mean, I do that all the time. I'm a copious note taker, and especially, and believe me, it does cut down on time. And I did a really interesting AI for journalism program before I left Crain, which was very valuable to me. And, but you have to be looking at that 2 or 3 times. Like they don't get it. They don't understand nuance. They may attribute a quote to the wrong person. Like you have to be saying, okay, this is going to cut down my time by 70%, but I need to. And I think that's hard though for early career people, right? Mid-stage, late-stage career, we know what we're doing. Like we're programmed to understand the nuances, But if you're 25 and you're early in a job, you don't know those
You
nuances yet.
don't.
So it's really hard to use that from soup to nuts. Like those are gut check things that we've all just sort of developed. So I do think it's interesting to see how the younger people are utilizing it, but if they forget the human element of it, so much is going to be lost. And writing is going to be one of those, like pure articles, books, what have you, is very much involved in that sort of connectivity to media. But you need to have that human connection to make it a story worth telling, I think.
That, and let's just look at the sales part of the thing. Nothing happens until something is sold. And the AI is not going to sell something for you. It might create a nice funnel, create a series of posts, create some activity, but you still have to pick up the phone or sit across from the table and say, listen, there's a $2 million deal war sitting and we're going to shake hands on it. And you like me, I like you. We're going to make this happen. It's still, shit has to be sold.
I'm telling you, salespeople are going to be a great commodity going forward. Like the people that truly know how to sell because they're listening and they're curious about the person they're selling to. That's going to be an art form that is going to be highly sought after in this future of AI.
I think so too. Yeah, the editing of the output with the human element and the nuances will be hugely valuable. So, how can everybody, before we wrap things up, tell everybody how to find you?
Fabulous. You can find me on LinkedIn at Kristen Oliveri. You could find me on Instagram at Chris Oliveri. I have a YouTube channel under Wealth Reimagined. And you can find me on my website, wealthreimagined.com. So many ways to get in touch.
Yeah. So, can we, for example, you're doing a podcast now, right?
I have not done my own. I'm doing videos on the YouTube channel.
But we can repost
I haven't
those.
gone so far as to, yeah,
We
you
can
can do all the
repost those
things.
for
And I will obviously post this on my site. But I haven't gone, I'm taking it like baby steps. I'm trying not to overwhelm myself day by day. But I was thinking it was a little easier to produce videos than a full-length podcast. But I mean, who knows? That could be my future.
Yeah, I think you should. Should's a bad word. I think it would be productive for you. So I don't mind having this on the recording too. What was, and she's going to kill me for not remembering her name because she was so sweet, your friend who stepped up at my son's art showing at Nouriel Rubini's house?
Goodness. Which
Do you
friend?
remember I called?
Was I there? I wasn't there.
Yeah,
I know I gave you somebody, but who?
Yeah. Was your friend that we sat on top of the Soho House a couple times, your girlfriend, who was the actress?
Joanna.
Yeah.
My best friend,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yeah,
of
yeah,
course.
yeah, yeah. Remember she stepped up when Tyler, my son, was in the, like, an urgent need? That was so great of her. Yeah, Joanna.
Joanna's the best.
Yeah.
She's still the best. She's still living her best life in New York City, too.
That's good to hear. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'll have to say hi to her. So,
I will. I'll tell her you said hi.
would you? That would be awesome. Yeah.
I will.
Yeah. This has been great. So good to see you. I'll
So
see you
much
in New York
fun.
City, but I'll let you know when we're coming in. And then we'll make
Yeah.
sure everybody gets a copy of this.
We'll go have Greek food, obviously.
Super. Let's do
Love
it.
it.
For
Thank
sure.
you, Arthur. So fun. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. All right, the recording's off.